This side Rahul Magan here is the Chief Executive Officer of Treasury Consulting PT Limited, which is a Singaporean multinational group. And today we would be covering a very dedicated topic on custodians, security lending and repurchase agreement. As you very well understand that Treasury Consulting is focusing too much on the custodian, and like a very tremendous success we achieved in the private placement, now we are entering into the custodian business also. But unfortunately, across the globe, the custodians are only be treated as a place where you will just give your security and they will take care of the rest of the action. Example, the corporate action, example, the taxation, withholding tax and all these kind of issues. But unfortunately, the world of custodians is just like a sea. The more you enter into, the more you will get, the more new things you will get, and which you never envisaged. Custodians, in my personal opinion, there are a lot of people, a lot of financial institutions who are playing a tremendous role in financial system. And my personal opinion suggests that custodians is one of them. Today we are covering a topic pertaining to a custodian, whereby we talk about how custodians are prone to security lending and repurchase agreement. In this, we are deliberately not mentioning the name of a custodian, rather we are mentioning this as a Mr. C. C stands for custodian, so we are not mentioning any name. But for other, we are mentioning the name, and as usual, let me give an indemnification. Take an indemnification is just for the sake of example. There is no, so Treasury Consulting is nothing personal, it's just for the sake of example. First of all, before moving further, we need to understand that what is security lending, security borrowings and lending agreement. It's just like a repo. Like all the Indians, those who are watching this video, they're quite familiar with the term which is repo and reverse repo. Although the hard reality is that the same 99% people do not know how actually it happens, how the interest settlement happens. Now, what is repo? In a simplistic note, that when a bank take a money from a central bank, and central bank will protect himself from a collateral, and collateral is subject to haircut, and haircut is zero when collateral is of government security. In India, corporate securities are not accepted as a collateral, so haircut is more or less zero as far as the Indian scenario is concerned. The similar kind of agreement custodians are also doing with their client, and sometimes the client of the client. I hope you would be surprised to know how come a custodian is subject to the security lending and borrowing agreement. Yes, they are. They are. Now, here we have taken an example of a custodian whose name is Mr. C. He is somewhere, Singapore, US. Let's take an example of Singapore. He is in Singapore. He is having a client, again for the sake of example, whose name is Vanguard Mutual Fund. Vanguard practically needs no introduction because Vanguard is the largest mutual fund of the globe. They need no introduction, like PIMCO. PIMCO is the largest hedge fund of the globe. Similarly, Vanguard is the largest mutual fund of the globe. Now, Vanguard is basically having the following securities in his portfolio, which they have given to, which they have given to custodian for a custody. Now, these are treasury bills, treasury notes, treasury bonds, RMBS, which is residential mortgage-backed securities, asset-backed security, munis. Munis is US munis, Europe munis, commercial paper, ETFs, exchange traded fund. Although when the appropriate time would come, we would be discussing about munis also in detail, and I hope you would have read the news which was there in the newspaper, sorry, in the Bloomberg TV yesterday night, that California, which is the largest state of US, is now scheduled to divide into 3 equivalent parts. Of course, this is what I am saying, this is as per the news. I have no authentication whether this news is correct or not, or to what extent the news is correct. But whatever being there in the Bloomberg TV, that California would be divided into 3 equivalent parts. And if this would happen, California Municipal is the largest holder of municipal bonds in the US, which is approximately $3.9 trillion. On a flatter note, we can take this as a $4 trillion also. If we take on a flatter note, then the US GDP is approximately $15 trillion. And only one state, which is California, although whether it would divide into 3 states or not, that is a different thing, time would tell. It holds $4 trillion of, approximately $4 trillion of municipal securities. So which is approximately roughly 24, somewhere between 24 to 25%, which is a pretty big number. It's a pretty big number. So only one state is holding approximately 24% of the value of the GDP in terms of munis. Why I have given you this example? Because of course when the time would come, we would deliberate on that issue. When we talk about munis, there is a different way of valuation when it comes to the US municipal securities, and there is a different way of valuation when it comes to the Europe municipal securities. You are not supposed to have the same, like one stick having all approach. One stick cannot fits everywhere. So similarly, you cannot have one single approach to value the munis. But in this video, we are not taking that into consideration. We are assuming that this has already been taken into consideration. But in a practical scenario, just to let you know that both the US munis and European munis have a different way of valuation and different way of haircuts and looking at it. Anyways, now we have a lender. Now Vanguard need money. Vanguard need money for a very short period of time. Now what Vanguard would have done here, Vanguard either will go to the custodian and they will go for a short-term line of credit, or they would have a different provisions with a different bank, like working capital loan, or maybe a different kind of provisions which they would be holding. But here we are not using the short-term line of credit. We are not going to the bank for our working capital loan. Rather, we are going to be using an arrangement which is known as security lending and repurchase agreement. Now Vanguard would be speaking to custodian, which is Mr. C, and custodian would say, okay, you go to your lender. So Vanguard will go to his lender, assuming BNP Paribas. Again, requires no introduction. BNP Paribas would lend some money. Let's take an example. Assume that the dirty value of all the securities is $1.2 trillion, which is a hefty big money. Lender is ready to lend Vanguard, say $400 odd billion, which is quite less than that, right? Now Vanguard would be asking the custodian, and custodian would allowing the Vanguard. Now please know that this is a pledge. Now ownership will not change. Note very carefully, this is a pledge. Ownership will not change. In a normal repo transaction, the ownership will change. Here ownership will not change. Vanguard will lend some part of the securities whereby the dirty valuation is supposed to be 400 billion, and BNP Paribas would lend 400 billion to Vanguard. Now what is the benefit Vanguard do have? They need not to use the short-term line of credit. This is the biggest benefit which they have. Another benefit, there is no need for them to go to the bank and do that. Third biggest benefit which Vanguard do have is that without even changing the ownership of the securities, they would be able to lend to BNP Paribas, and BNP Paribas would be able to give them the money. Now what would happen? Vanguard would use that money for their professional purpose, for the fund management purpose, and once the appropriate time would come, Vanguard would return $400 billion alongside the interest, and they would get their securities back. But this transaction is quite easy for Vanguard, but it is not as easy for custodian Mr. C. Because custodian would always have a sense of issue that, boss, ideally before this transaction, the dirty valuation of the security was $1.2 trillion. But now it is 400 less, it is $1,200 billion. So I just write it here. So Vanguard would always be worried that the valuation was $1,200 billion, but actually $400 billion worth of security is given. So total $800 billion worth of security is pending to me. And now if anything would have happened, if Vanguard would not be able to return, then BNP Paribas will not return these securities. It's a kind of non-recourse loan, right? If BNP Paribas will not return this security, the ownership is still with the Vanguard, then there would be issue between custodian and BNP Paribas. So what custodian is actually doing, which is a cost on the custodian, and of course they would be charging from the client, which is Vanguard, they would be taking a CDS protection of that, which I write here. Now they would be taking a CDS protection. In this they would try to save themselves. Now what would be the various scenarios Vanguard not been able to pay to BNP Paribas? It could be Vanguard winded up. It could be a project in which Vanguard invested might winded it up, or there are number of reasoning behind that. Whatever would be the reasoning, Mr. C, which is a custodian, would be taking a CDS protection, and that CDS protection is having a cost. That cost would be a part and parcel of the total cost which they are charging from the Vanguard. Now Vanguard is safe, because Vanguard is know that if anything would have happened with between me and the BNP, then my custodian will not lose the money. So ultimately his books will not go away. This is quite a small word of custodians which we like to discuss. At the end, custodians play a very important role in the financial system. Unfortunately, we tend to believe, our perception towards custodian is that, boss, they are just nothing but a kind of drawer or kind of a locker where you just keep your securities and you forget. No, boss, it's not like that. Custodians play a pretty important role. Now, the next time when we would be coming on custodians, we would be coming with a topic called staple arrangements, which is nothing but an employee salary structure. How custodians are issuing the staple arrangements with their clients. Custodians play a very important role. Treasury consulting is in the custody business. You have, of course, we are in the PPP business. If you have any requirement, you are most welcome to contact to us. Our Skype ID is Rahul5327. Email rahul.magan@treasuryconsulting.in. Platform www.fixedincome.global. Website www.treasuryconsulting.in. Mobile 9899242978. 9899242978. Thank you and have a wonderful time ahead. Thank you.